This morning on Houston Newsmakers, open carry is now legal in the Lone Star State. We speak with law enforcement about what the law means for you and how they're prepared to handle it. And how open carry could impact businesses and how they're reacting to the new law. Plus, remembering Harris County Precinct 1 Commissioner L. Franco Lee. We're giving you insight into his influence on the county from one man who knew him well.
From KPRC Channel 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
Good morning, I'm Andy Sirota in for Cambrell Marshall. The start of the new year ushered in a new era for our state's gun laws. The open carry law went into effect on January the 1st. That means the more than 800,000 adults who hold concealed handgun permits can openly carry their holstered firearms in many places. Joining me this morning to talk about that are Harris County Precinct 1 Constable Alan Rosen, Ray Hunt, President of the Houston Police Officers Union, and Major Chad Norvell with the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office. Gentlemen, great to have you here with me this morning.
Good to be here.
Okay, so our state has strong gun culture, and some say we already have lax concealed carry laws on the books. So why is open carry necessary in the state of Texas?
I really think it's just the sort of the legislators kind of pandering to a particular group of people. I think that it's something, concealed handguns is something I'm clearly for and I support, but open carry just is a whole different scenario. I just think it brings on a lot of different problems.
Right.
The Houston Police Department opposed open carry, but the Houston Police Officers Union was neutral on it. Our members were split on the issue. We were very fearful whenever concealed handgun laws passed in the 90s, and nothing came of that. So we're keeping an open mind on it and simply enforcing what the legislatures tell us is a law, and now it's open carry. Major?
And I would echo what Ray said. We support what the legislator has passed, and we support citizens' right to carry a weapon if they so choose.
All right, gentlemen, more with you in just a second. There are many questions about how this law is going to work, from where open carry is legal to how police will be trained to handle citizens carrying weapons openly. Channel 2 investigator Robert Arnold explains the basic rules of open carry when it comes to public places, private businesses, and government buildings.
On New Year's Day, Texas joins 45 other states allowing for the open carry of handguns.
Am I going to open carry? No. Is he going to open carry? Probably.
And like many other states, Texas does have some ground rules.
There's going to be confusion, but I don't think there's going to be widespread panic over it.
First, you have to be licensed to openly carry a handgun. If you already have a concealed handgun license, then you're covered. If you don't, then you'll have to get a license to carry from the state. And police officers do have the right to stop a gun owner and ask to see their handgun license. Second, your gun has to be in a belt or shoulder holster.
I don't agree with people walking with a gun anywhere, actually.
And that brings up the issue of where you can openly carry a handgun. You can openly carry in most city and county-owned buildings or other facilities like parks, but you can only carry in areas open to the general public. Restricted areas are still off limits to guns. And some government meetings, like Commissioner's Court, also can prohibit guns.
Everybody just needs to be prepared, to see things maybe they're not used to seeing in places they're normally used to going.
You still cannot carry a gun into courtrooms or court-related offices, on federal property, inside schools, sporting events, prisons, polling places, on university and college campuses, or in secured areas of airports. Private businesses also have the right to ban guns, either by posting signs or asking patrons to take their gun outside.
I think people are going to make a mistake of carrying where they're not supposed to.
Police have been preparing for the new law to take effect, giving officers extra training.
But we're going to actually drill down and explain to them the small nuances.
Police Chief Charles McClellan says his department is also bracing for an uptick in 911 calls.
I do think there's going to be a lot of controversy, and then a lot of people are going to be calling and going, oh my God, someone's got a gun.
McClellan says his officers are prepared to handle those calls. But District Attorney Devin Anderson warns if someone dials 911 and intentionally lies about a gun owner acting dangerously, then that person could face charges of making a false report.
I hope people will use common sense.
City of Houston officials have said civilian employees will not be allowed to carry a gun on the job. The county and state are letting each department head and elected official make the decision whether employees will be allowed to openly carry a gun. For Houston Newsmakers, I'm Robert Arnold.
Law enforcement officials have shown concern about how to approach an unfolding crime scene where multiple people can be seen with weapons, which could cause dangerous confusion in active shooter scenarios. So, gentlemen, how do you prepare for this situation?
Well, obviously, we're going to approach a situation with anybody armed as being a threat until we have a full understanding of what their involvement in that crime scene is. So we are going to take that necessary precaution to ensure that our officers are safe and ensure that the crime scene's maintained properly. So we're going to treat everybody there with the same way we would with approaching any crime scene.
Clearly, we're going to be cautious. Clearly, it's probably going to require a few more officers on a unfolding scene to make sure that you've got enough officers there to keep an eye on the one or two extra people who may have a holstered weapon. But you know, this has not been the law since the 1800s, so this is going to be an unfolding situation that we're going to have to deal with on a case-by-case basis. But we're confident we're able to be able to deal with it.
Major, your thoughts on this?
I would say dealing with someone on a crime scene is a little different than dealing with just the general public in a grocery store, for example. So it'd certainly be treated differently at a crime scene situation. And over this past week that it's been in place, Fort Meade County has had 0 calls from anyone.
There's a school of thought that says open carry laws benefit public safety and deter crime. Others have said that they are dangerous to the very foundation of our democracy and essentially create an invitation to chaos. Where do each of you fall on that spectrum? Constable, we'll start with you.
I fall on the spectrum that I am completely for concealed carry. I think that having that tactical advantage of knowing that somebody's armed but it's concealed gives the person a tactical advantage if there is a crime that's happening or unfolding that requires that kind of use of force. So from my perspective, open carry is going to potentially you know, scare kids. I think that criminals could easily disarm some of our open carry folks. We're obviously going to follow the law. We're going to enforce the law. But I just think that I'm hoping, and the vast majority of the people that I've spoken to about this particular law have all said they're going to continue to concealed carry as opposed to open carry.
Ray?
I'm not a big proponent of open carry as far as myself. I would not open carry unless I were in uniform. I carry a weapon pretty much everywhere I go, but it's concealed. I guess on the tactical side, I believe you're more tactically savvy if you have it concealed. However, I also say this: if someone's got a weapon open carry, a person who's looking to make an attack on someone probably is not going to target that person. So I clearly can see both sides of this.
Major?
And I agree with what Constable Rosen said. You are giving up some advantage of the individual or the enemy, so to speak, the bad guy, not knowing you have a weapon. And that is certainly something that needs to be considered.
All right. Gentlemen, want to continue this conversation in just a moment. The new open carry law not only impacting citizens, but businesses as well. The businesses that are already taking a stand for or against the law, and what business owners should know now that open carry is legal. That's next on Houston Newsmakers. Welcome back to Houston Newsmakers. We are back here with our law enforcement panel to talk about the new open carry law here in the state of Texas. All right, if someone were to say Texas has become the model for more relaxed open carry, how would each of you respond to that?
I respond that it has become more relaxed. You know, initially I think the legislators were looking at having a constitutional carry type of law, which wouldn't require people to have licenses to get to open carry. So I think we have become more relaxed.
Ray?
I believe that we have more than half the states already have open carry laws, but when you're talking about a metropolitan area like Houston, obviously it makes more concerns than a rural area, but I believe that we're pretty much going along the same lines as the other half the states that already have open carry.
Major?
I would agree. That's actually, I think we're the 45th state, which is surprising to learn that, and many states don't require a license at all. There were some deficiencies with our laws, such as holsters not defined, not certain kinds aren't required, but so there's some cleanup they can do in our law in the next session.
All right, I want to dig deeper into this. From day one, businesses and gun owners have made it clear where they stand. One business we found not only encouraged it, but offered discounts to gun owners who wanted to observe the new law. Others enacted their right to ask customers to conceal their handguns. Samantha Patashkin has more on the divide between those both for and against open carry.
Caesar Pallet owns this Dairy Queen in Missouri City, a place where you won't see guns on customers anytime soon.
Most of the customers that I had, they might get, scared or something.
Caesar is just one of several restaurant owners who have decided to ban open carry from their establishments.
For me, it needs to be concealed.
The new Texas law went into effect, but individual business owners are allowed to decide if customers need to conceal their weapons. Over at Brooks Barbecue in Cypress, the decision is simple.
I see it as a defense mechanism. I see it, as a way to, as a deterrent for you being a target.
Owner Trent Brooks not only welcomes open carry, he's giving customers a discount if they have a gun.
I think a lot of times, even as a concealed handgun carrier, you worry about the fact that your gun may be exposed, and this is a way that you don't have to really be as concerned about it.
For Houston Newsmakers, I'm Samantha Patashkin.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this. H-E-B, Whole Foods, and Randall's have posted signs banning the open carry of handguns. Kroger says it will follow the law. The Galleria also plans to enforce its existing policy of not allowing possession of any weapon on its property, concealed or displayed openly. So, gentlemen, how do you think this new law will impact businesses? Constable, let's start with you.
I think that you're going to have some businesses that are clearly against it. I have a friend of mine that's in the jewelry business and has a controlled access door, and clearly he's not going to want to allow somebody to come into his jewelry store from the outside where he sees a gun, because he doesn't know if that person's there as someone to purchase jewelry or to actually rob his place. So I think businesses are going to have to make up their mind as to their customer base and what makes sense for them. But I do think it's going to affect businesses on both sides of the aisle, because you have some people that say, I won't go to a business that allows open carry, and then of course you have people on the opposite side of that.
Right?
Clearly going to affect them, but to what extent, who knows? I can't believe that more than 5 or 6% of the population is even thinking about carrying open anyway. So I really don't see it as being a huge impact. I'm sure it'll make some impact for the smaller businesses. I think it's fine. I think I heard a talk show host the other day say, take 2 of your best customers and see what they think about it, and kind of poll your people who are coming to your location. So I think it's a good idea.
To gauge it that way.
Sure.
Major, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it will affect businesses a whole lot either. I don't think people are going to quit going to H-E-B, as some may say they might do. And I would ask that the gun advocates, some have said they won't go to those businesses anymore, and they're almost angry at those businesses for prohibiting it. But just as they want to exercise their right to carry that weapon, they should respect that business's right to not have that weapon in their business.
And as we saw in Samantha's story, some businesses have been caught in the middle of this open carry debate. So what types of questions should law enforcement expect to get from business owners and companies? Constable?
I think, just as I said before, I had a friend in the jewelry business that called me and to ask my thoughts about it. And really it's an individual business kind of decision. And, how is it going to impact his business? Again, we're going to enforce the law. We're going to ensure that we're going to follow the law and make sure, we're going to ensure that businesses that do want to prohibit weapons from coming in have the proper signs that are posted that legislatively are required. And so I think that's what we're going to see. That's how we're going to be able to help some of the businesses, is through education.
Right?
It's a decision they're going to have to make on their own, but if they're asking for opinions of police officers, I believe if you ask 10 police officers, you're going to get 2 separate sets of answers, because we pretty much are divided on this. Some of our members say they want to have open carry, and some of them say they don't want to have open carry. I personally will not open carry. I will have mine concealed, but that's just a personal preference.
Major?
And I would agree with Ray that I don't open carry either, even though we're authorized by law. And what Constable Rosen said, it's important for businesses, if they don't want open carry, they have to have the legal signage. They can't simply have the red Ghostbusters logo, so to speak, over a gun and expect people not to walk in, because they still can legally until they're asked to leave, and at that point they would have to.
Any final thoughts as we wrap up our conversation on this topic? Constable, let's start with you.
I know we've been training and having classes. We've trained over 5,000 Harris County employees, and we're starting to open it up to the public, because there is this unknown about the new law. And we just want to make sure that we get as much factual information into people's hands as we possibly can. So look online. We're going to have an open carry class down at Harris County, and look up the law because it's all there. And I would encourage people to just look at the various options that are presented and figure out what works best for their family.
Right.
You know, in Houston, we have a shortage of police officers. We really don't have enough manpower to respond to an uptick in calls. We're not getting a huge uptick in these calls. I believe we got single digits in the first few days that it was open carry. I will say this, though, I'm glad for Channel 2 and others who are educating the public that this is the law now, because some of these folks just simply, they don't know that it's the law. So when they see that, if the person's not acting suspicious, I would hope that they wouldn't call the police. If the person's acting suspicious, sure, call the police. But we're hoping that folks like you and others will educate the public that this is a new law.
Major?
And again, I would say that it's important for residents to make sure where they're getting their information from. If businesses or residents have questions, contact your law enforcement agency. Make sure you know what source of information you're receiving it from. Some of the gun advocates have put out false information, not entirely accurate. So make sure they know where they're getting their information from, and that's what the law they're following.
And you can go on our website at www.pct1constable.net, and we have a shorter version of sort of a PowerPoint presentation that shows you all the different scenarios of the new law, and it's a real helpful thing if anybody wants to go to that and take a look at that.
All right, some great insight from each of you this morning. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Thank you, Andy. Remembering a man who has served Harris County for decades, we hear about the late Precinct 1 Commissioner L. Franco Lee from a judge who knew him well. That's next when Houston Newsmakers continues.
From KPRC Channel 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
Good morning and welcome back to Houston Newsmakers. This past Sunday, Harris County lost a big part of the fabric of our community. Harris County Commissioner L. Franco Lee's life came to an unexpected end. The 66-year-old public servant died of a heart attack. Commissioner Lee began his political career in 1979 when he was elected to the Texas House of Representatives. In 1985, he was elected and sworn in as the first African-American Harris County Commissioner. His precinct stretched from downtown Houston through southeast Harris County, where his name will be kept alive through a park and a community center that bear his name. Joining me now is Harris County Judge Ed Emmett to talk about Commissioner Lee's life and his legacy. Great to see you as always.
Morning.
You two are friends. How would you describe the late commissioner, and how would you describe your relationship with him?
L. Franco Lee was a consummate professional. He was a very quiet man, and in politics that's rare. You know, normally people in political office love to give speeches and tout themselves. He was somebody who just got the work done, and he was an engineer by training, and he was very proud of the roads and the bridges and the parks and things like that he built, as well as all the programs for the youth that he was involved in.
And you touched on my next question here. Commissioner Lee was known as a doer. As you said, he got things done. And he was known for working with residents in underserved areas of his precinct. So what kind of impact would you say did he have on the community?
Well, clearly he had a huge impact. And he's one of a group that we're losing that group. I mean, he followed Mickey Leland to the Texas House. When L. Franco and I went to the Texas House together in 1979, that was when Mickey Leland had moved on to Congress. So that whole team of people has served the 5th Ward and the 3rd Ward and the underserved areas for a long, long time.
What would you say that he's most proud of? What is his biggest accomplishment?
Well, interestingly enough, there's some debate about that now that he's passed away. Some people say the engineering projects, the roads and the bridges, the things that have a lasting infrastructure. I and others say he was really proud of the things he did for youth. The Summer Olympics program, which touched 10,000 people every summer and kept those kids off the street and into something useful.
The kids were really important to him.
Oh, very, very important. The people, because you remember, he came up of an age when the civil rights movement was still just becoming a reality, and he implemented it very, very well.
What would you say his legacy is going to be?
I think his legacy is a long-time service, and years from now we'll still be finding things that we'll look at and go, oh, Franco did that. You know, whether it's a little park, whether it's a little improvement, or whether it's some program that he was involved in. He had his finger in everything in Harris County.
So whoever takes over that position, they're going to have some big shoes to fill.
Huge shoes to fill.
And how's that going to work?
Well, that's a very complicated process. As county judge, I appoint the person who will serve until January 1st of next year. But he will stay on the ballot. And since he was unopposed, he'll win the primary. And then the Democratic Party has to select a replacement for him. And then that person will serve from January 1st, 2017 on.
How's his family doing?
They're doing a lot better than I was when I called them. I'll put it like that. I talked to his wife, Kay, and she's a strong woman, and they've been together for many, many years. And they're doing okay, but it was such a sudden shock. The county family, which he also considered family, is still not doing so well.
All right. Harris County Judge Ed Emmett talking about the life and the legacy of the late Commissioner L. Franco Lee. Sir, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, stay with us. We'll be right back. If you'd like to join our social media newsmakers conversation, follow us on Twitter at KPRC Cambrell #Newsmakers. And if there are subjects or stories that you'd like to see discussed, you can email us at HoustonNewsmakers@click2Houston.com. A big thank you to our guests for joining us this morning and all of you for tuning in. If you'd like to check out some of the previous shows or get information on today's show, you can go to click2Houston.com/newsmakers. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.